What's poppin'? Real ones. Logan Murdoch here. Roger Bell there. Howard Beck in the motherfucking cut. Cliff is on the boards with just a big smile on his face because his Birds are going to the Super Bowl. This is our second intro that, so anyways, we're going to talk about some Jimmy Butler. We're going to talk about this, a little bit of that. Let's start with Jimmy really quick off the top. Me and Howard had our little pre-pod talk yesterday, and we're going to make this fast. But I just want to say, just first of all, he's been suspended indefinitely, which means he's probably suspended up until the trade deadline. And that's honestly irrelevant to the fact that the content that has accompanied this saga has been amazing. I DM'd Raja twice of like Instagram videos of Jimmy Butler and Kevin Love. Where are we right now? Let's just do like quick 5 minutes on Jimmy Butler. Howard, how are you feeling? Your face is getting a little red. Your blood boiling. How are we going? Are we good? Like, what's going on? How are we feeling about the Jimmy Butler saga at this stage? I feel like we've said everything we could say, but like, it's top news right now.
Listen, I'll say this: we have resolution of some sort, right? If he's suspended indefinitely, and I think they said minimum 5 games, which takes us through the trade deadline. Trade deadline now 9 days away as we tape this.
Yeah.
So the saga is basically over. If we can assume that he gets traded by the trade deadline, at least the Butler versus Riley saga is done. It's over. He's suspended until the trade deadline. Hopefully he gets traded by the trade deadline. Then he's somebody else's headache. It'll be really fascinating to see what Jimmy says when he reaches his next destination and talks again, and how the Heat respond or don't when that happens. But I think we can safely say, I shouldn't assume too much. There are a lot of people around the league who feel like, and felt like even before this, it was going to get resolved, meaning via trade. So if we can assume a trade, and we should not assume, but if we can assume a trade is happening, at minimum, the Miami Jimmy thing is done. And 9 days from now, at the latest, he'll be somewhere else. And we don't have to talk about suspensions anymore or missing planes, unless it happens with the next team, which you can never rule out.
Roger, do you think this should have happened sooner? I mean, it seemed like we were coming to this conclusion pretty fast, right? Like, it felt like both sides were dug in. So they have just been like, yo, Jimmy, even like, just, we'll see you soon and we'll, pay your salary or not pay your salary, but like, you can, I mean, because like, they know their team better than we know them. Like, what, shouldn't they have just like done this from jump if they were at this much of an impasse?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, at this point, like when you're matching petty with petty, and I think I'm correct on this, but if I'm wrong, please let me know. Like if you are telling someone to go away, you are responsible for their salary. So like that's basically a win-win for someone in Jimmy's situation. Like he don't want to play the role. You're asking him to play. You're letting him not be responsible for coming to practice and shit like that, and you still have to pay him. Well, if you just make it untenable to the point where he don't want to be there and he's acting a fool, now you get to suspend him and you don't have to pay him for that, right? Like, so when you're matching pettiness with pettiness, I mean, that's a net win for the Heat, right? Like you're like, we get to suspend you now versus making you go away without pay. I'm in agreement with Howard. Like, I think it is done now that they've taken this step and it's just completely like unresolvable. I don't remember you asked me last time, Logan, if I thought like Miami would swallow the poison pill if they had to. I'm not so sure they do that anymore. I think suspending him through the trade deadline, like clearly their intent is to move him. Like, I guess there's still a world where that doesn't happen, but it's just crazy because like again, I've referenced, getting sideways with an organization and taking my golf clubs on road trips and stuff like that. But, missing flights and walking out of stuff, like that's wild. And, it's just not a great look, man. And I'm for the most part pro player, but for the random fan that I hear blaming the Heat and Pat Riley for what's happened here, I'm always baffled at that person because I mean, at the end of the day, it's your job. You're a professional basketball player, or you're a professional football player, or you're on a team, and whether you like it or not, like you have a duty to show up there and try to do your work. Now, you don't have to like what they're asking you to do, but you got to do it. And I just don't see how people are blaming anyone other than Jimmy on it.
I think the other thing, and I thought of you when this was happening, Roger, like there's also like when you talk about from a teammate aspect, there's been, we referenced Kevin Love like making fun of the situation, right? And he has like a a good way about it and bringing levity to it. But then I think about also like Tyler Hero, who's like, I'm paraphrasing, but his quote was, that's Jimmy, and like he's in and out of the lineup, and we just got to figure it out, right? And then like, but I think what's getting lost in this discussion, it's all the entertaining part of Jimmy, and like he's done this in multiple things, but also just like what it does to the teammate aspect. And I think that's what you see, like when you see the backlash from like a Udonis Haslam, this is why it is, right? Because yeah, you're trying to get what you want, but it at a certain point, like something has to give. You can't do your teammates like that because
Yeah, what's left
walking
in the
out of a
wake of
shoot
that?
around
Like,
is like, what are you like? You're walking out of a shoot around because you didn't get what you want. Why would you even come anyway? I feel like there's a discernment between teammates. If on one hand, say if you're going through a contract impasse, and you know this more better than I do, Roger, but like players don't get in other players' pockets like that. Like that's between you and management, right? And
right.
but when you bring it to the team and you come back, you should be all in with the group. And I feel like the problem here with Jimmy Butler is he's got one foot in and out. Like either come and go to work or not. But I feel like he's putting his teammates through a roller coaster that they
Yeah,
don't deserve.
you're right in that while we're not in each other's pockets and we're not really worried about your negotiations with the team versus mine and X, Y, and Z, like when you start creating this level of instability around the organization, that is now affecting my bread because it's affecting some degree my ability to go out there and win games, my ability to be ready to either start or not start if I'm backing you up and I'm the sometimes starter. Everybody else that's in the lineups, you're just affecting everyone's ability and you're affecting their pockets in that way. Not to mention that, I would say for the most part, even that sometimes is like, all right, man, like we're going to put Jimmy, or whatever player out of our mind. We're going to treat it like he's not going to be here to the best of our ability, compartmentalize that. If he shows up, we will try to like incorporate him on the fly, but we got to prepare as if he's not a part of the team. That's the only way we can really do this and keep rolling in the right direction. Where people start getting salty is when you got him sitting around on a tarmac waiting for 5 fucking hours or whatever that is. Now you're fucking with me, right? Like you acting like your time is more important than mine. While you might be a more important, cog in this wheel, like don't mistake us as human beings and your time being more important than my time. I might have something to do or some family where we're headed to and shit to do. And that's when you start to disrespect your teammates in a real way, right? Like the rest of it is work environment. But like when you start having people waiting 5 hours around for you, like that's their job. Now I start to get a little, heated at the situation in a way that I might not be ordinarily.
Well, here's the thing too. Like, why is Jimmy in this funk in the first place? Well, it goes back to not getting the contract extension that he wanted in the offseason. So it all starts there, right? And eventually this ends with, I need to be somewhere else. The Heat have already told him. They've told the world, we're going to trade you when we get the right offer. They're not trying to keep him. They're not trying to hold him hostage. So for Jimmy to come back and then act up again, do whatever, missing a practice, missing a plane, walking out of shoot around because he's not going to start, whatever. They've already told you they're going to trade. You're going to get what you want. In the meantime, all you have to do is show up, show at least a minimal amount of professionalism. You're not going to play hard because you already weren't playing hard, and which I hate to say because I love Jimmy Butler for how hard he always plays throughout his career. But it's clear the last month or so that he's been just trying to angle his way out through whatever means possible. But come to work, play up to some certain minimal standard. Just do your thing. You don't want to talk to anybody? Don't talk to anybody. You want to be a dick? Be a dick. Oh, it's fine. Whatever. But they've already said they're going to trade you. And there's less than 2 weeks left. Like, could you just show up and do the right thing in the short term until they finally resolve this by trade? He couldn't even do that much. Like, this is all on him. And Raja, I'm so glad you said this as the former player, because the number of people, the arguments I was getting into last night on Blue Sky, everybody come find me on Blue Sky at howardbeck.bsky.social. I am not tweeting on the other platform at all anymore at this stage. The arguments I was getting from people trying to make, well, what about the Heat's responsible? What about Riley? Like, what did they do other than not give him an extension and not trade him the second he said, I want out? Like, it's hard to make trades in this league, harder than ever. And especially when it's somebody with Jimmy Butler's contract, Jimmy Butler's age, 35, with a lot of wear and tear. He doesn't play a lot. And all of these antics are the kind of things that scare off a lot of teams. So it's not like they're trying not to trade him or inflame the situation. I don't know where the Heat have gone wrong here. I don't ever want to sound like I'm an apologist for either side in any of these conflicts, but this is like 99.8% Jimmy Butler at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree, Howard. I am more often than not seeing things through a player's lens, gonna side with the player, and you know, I pride myself on calling a spade a spade. I agree with you 100%. Like and I would just add, I think you touched on it, is like, look, dude, you're not even like, what you want is to get out of here, and you're like tanking our ability to do that. Like, do you know what I mean?
My
like,
biggest thing with this, bro. Like,
you're not even helping us help you.
You over here leaking, I want to go anywhere but Memphis. You're doing the fucking I'm back shit, right? Like and then like losing by 30.
The I'm back thing was like embarrassing.
So embarrassing, bro.
So you were not Michael Jordan. And the context kind of matters with the I'm back, by the way. Good Lord.
I mean, I'd like to see him on Phoenix all that with all intents and purposes, just because of like he could put a kick in their ass. But like, does anybody want this headache, right? Then you know, like you're gonna have to give up assets and then pay him on another deal. Like, dude,
that's a scary one, man. If I was in I'm telling you, if I was in somebody's front office, you know, at this point, and I've sat in those meetings when you're brainstorming with the whole office, you got analytics in there, you probably got your owner like on a conference call while you all sit around in one of those war rooms and like kind of throw shit back and forth. Like, I'd probably be the person in there with the like, guys, are we sure? Like, are we sure about this? I think, at this point, see someone who's willing, like he is willing to burn your shit to the ground. Like that scares me. People who are willing to do that, like scare me. To Howard, just, you know, you come in, you go to work. Like, again, I'll go back to Utah. I didn't love that, and I was playing golf on the road trips. But when I had to be at practice, I was at a damn practice. When I had to work in a practice, I worked in a practice. Pre-game, when it was time to shoot and get my shots up, we're doing that. When it was time to be on a bus, you're on a bus. Like, yeah, I'm not happy about it. And in my free time, I might do something I want to do in a way that I haven't ordinarily done. But when it's time to clock into work, you clock into work. Someone who can't do that and is willing to like just burn your shit to the ground, I'm afraid of them.
By the way, quick just side note, because it comes up every so often in these discussions, and Raja, you alluded to it earlier. The Heat could not have resolved this by just sending Jimmy away, because in the new collective bargaining agreement with the player participation policy, you're no longer allowed to just by mutual consent say we're just sending you home. So they couldn't, like, that was not an option. It was not an option on the table to just say, listen, go away until we figure out how to trade you somewhere. It was not an option. So their only option was play him if he shows up, suspend him if he violates team rules. And that's what they've done. Like, everything the Heat have done has been in reaction to Jimmy, and in trying to defuse or resolve the situation. And the only thing you could blame them for not doing, I suppose, is not trading him yet. But again, really hard to do in this league. And when they finally do make a trade in the next 9 days, which I do think is going to happen just because people around the league feel like it's going to happen, and I trust folks I talk to, it's going to end up being some wild ass like 5-6 team trade potentially. Like, this is, or it's, you know, it's minimum, it's a third team, probably a fourth and maybe a fifth. And like, it's going to be like Jimmy's going to Phoenix and Beal is going to like Chicago and Levine's going to Milwaukee. And like, it's going to be one of these. Middleton's going to land somewhere. Like, it's going to be some crazy ass deal that involves like a half dozen of the names that we've been, you know, monitoring.
All the usual suspects for trade.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. It should be fun.
And those take a long time to do. Like, obviously.
They do.
Right? They take probably months. But let's I want to say one thing before we go off to another subject. I want to say something about, like, give flowers to the Miami Heat, the team, from the coaching staff on down, because a lesser group in a more fractured group would fold under this. Like I saw them in the Bay, like right after the first suspension went down, like they were still all business. They were still, I believe they won that game. They were still locked in. And another, like, this type of thing could cripple a basketball team in a locker room. And
hashtag eat culture.
Hashtag eat culture. You know what I mean? We out here. Hashtag bring Raja home. What the hell?
No, but can I just say,
hashtag get Raja in the locker room.
Can I just say real quick though, by the way, the heat culture thing, it gets overdone. It's a little much.
I don't think it does. I don't think it does. I really don't think it does.
It grates on fans of other teams, especially, right? Because it sounds so sanctimonious and smug. And it is. But guys, like, all right, Raja, you've been around the league a long time. This is my 28th. It's hard to believe. I hate saying that out loud. It's my 28th season covering the league. In the nearly 30 years that I've been covering the league, there's a handful of teams that you could identify as having meaningful, substantive, consistent cultures of some sort, and in a positive way, because there are plenty of bad cultures too. There's a handful of teams over 30 years that you could point to, and Miami and San Antonio, of course, are the top of that list, and there are some others along the way. It's meaningful, and like the idea that the Jimmy saga somehow is indicative of heat culture being fraudulent. Folks, it's the opposite. They're suspending him to hold him accountable, and a team that has a strong culture, strong values, defends those values and those standards by holding people accountable and suspending them if they're out of line. If you let him go, and to Logan's point, if the team's coming apart or now everybody is just going their own separate ways, that's when you've lost the culture. The fact that they're still playing hard and just going about their business and just not letting this affect them shows that the culture can endure. So like, I hate to be the one to sound like I'm not part of the smug hashtag heat culture thing, but folks, this is why you establish standards and stand by them and uphold them.
And
so
I mean, also to add on to that for that
times.
long, right? To like have a culture for that long. Because I think I'm looking at Raja right now. Like the Suns had a legitimate culture when he was there, right? And sometimes
we're talking sustained.
No, I'm
right?
I'm saying how impressive that is to have it for a long time. And I was referencing the Suns, like when they do, like when you guys had a culture, it was a culture, but it wasn't sustained, right? And to have it over 20, 30 years, it's crazy, Beck. Because when you started covering the league, I was 3 years old. That's why.
That was painful. Thank you.
Shout out to you. But I do marvel at that. Like, I think it's a real thing. That's why I don't really like say. I don't think it's like it should be in your face. Anytime, like you can only talk. I think the only thing you can compare it to is San Antonio, and for this long, at least, right? So,
yeah.
Look,
anyways,
San Antonio had to deal with Kawhi, right? Like this happens sometimes. You get sideways with the player. The Spurs culture of 30 years is not negated by the fact that they got sideways with Kawhi and ended up having to trade him under duress. Like it's like culture is not negated by a crisis. It's how you handle the crisis that either sustains or doesn't sustain the culture. So like culture is not perfection. Culture doesn't mean that the Heat do everything right or that the Spurs do everything right. It means that they try to stay as consistent as possible with the values that they espouse, and I think we're seeing that. Sorry, Raja.
No, it's a good point, and I would just say like both of those organizations like had to deal with players. Interestingly, both of those players have at least a reputation of being high maintenance at points, and looking for maybe things outside of the norm or what everybody else on the team would get. Like there are demands, like for lack of a better way to put it, that need to be met for them at times. And I think that, getting sideways with players like that, I would argue is even more evidence of their culture and their sustained culture, like not capitulating to to every single thing. Like we'll bend to a point, we'll acquiesce some of it. Like we get it. You're the star, but like, we're not going to completely, I think that's backbone. And I think not having a backbone is part of the reason you don't see teams with sustained cultures for extended periods of times. The ones that do, inevitably are going to come across someone that is pushing the limits to the point where they're like, "Hey, we've met our level of tolerance for that, and we won't stand for it." And you'll get sideways with them. But I think that's a representation of the culture.
Yes.
Shout out to the culture.
Shout out to the culture.
for the culture. All about the culture. You know what we need more than ever, Raja?
The culture.
Goddamn right.